Welcome back to Second Breakfast. We interrupt your regularly scheduled program for another great horror movie that we wanted to talk about. The Longlegs episodes we did last week got a huge reception, so we wanted to feed the beast. Hello, new people. Maggie's back with me, of course, on this episode to talk about Oddity. So this is a Shudder original that we managed to catch in theaters last night at Alamo Drafthouse. It's a work of Irish horror that's written and directed by Damien McCarthy. And just to lay this out, the premise that's written on the website for the film is a psychic medium attempts to uncover the truth behind her sister's murder at the site of the crime. I absolutely adored this movie. And the reason I wanted to talk about this, because now we don't talk about everything we see, but this movie scared the dog shit out of me. My palms were sweating, locked in terror in a way I haven't felt in years. I know we went nuts for Longlegs last week. I had to wipe my palms on my jeans. It was disgusting.
That's so funny. I was going to say, I feel like your reaction to this movie was my reaction to Longlegs. I think you were you found yourself a little underwhelmed by Longlegs. Still really liked it, obviously, especially enough to talk about it for 2 different episodes. But I think it didn't hit the way you wanted it to hit. And I think that's what happened here on the flip side. I was not quite as struck as you were by Oddity.
This one looked amazing and it tickled my writer brain. It had a whip-smart story. It did the thing I complimented in Longlegs where it doesn't over-explain and put the pieces together. It gives you, as the audience member, room to connect some of those dots.
Definitely.
It's not like it's flattering you, making you feel smart, but you feel involved. You feel complicit. You feel active as a viewer.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. Are we going to spoil anything?
Mild spoilers. Nothing beyond basically what you'd see in the trailers.
Okay.
The twists are great. I don't want to ruin those. The characters I found really rich. The dialogue, the world, the locations are beautiful.
That's true.
In this
they
movie.
Were.
And shout out to all of our other discussions. There was a dash of Shakespeare in the movie with the doubling of Carolyn Bracken playing dual leads. She plays these 2 sisters in these different storylines.
That was pretty cool.
To compare it to Longlegs for a second, I wanted to highlight that this movie worked for me on the first watch immediately. Longlegs took 2 viewings to really settle in for me, and I think the huge difference there is that the supernatural elements of this story, the occult, all of that is baked in from almost the first scene. It's foregrounded early on when you're introduced to one of the lead characters who's a psychic. So I think that's why it clicked for me almost immediately.
That's really interesting because I was noticing after that what I loved about Longlegs, part of what I loved was the supernatural element. I like that it kept going and going and going and took it to that extra level that you didn't expect. And here, I think because we started on the supernatural level, I was left feeling a little disappointed by it. I think I was sort of hoping that it would turn out not to be supernatural after all. I think that's the kind of twist I was hoping for, and I didn't get that. So I actually found myself disappointed. And I think I was a little thrown by the mix of home invasion and supernatural. Like, I think maybe that's also why I had a hard time with the supernatural element, but it is funny that that's really what made or broke these movies for both of us.
That's totally fair, and I'm sorry for you. I
wanted to like it.
Sometimes we come out of a movie and we're always like looking at each other and kind of putting our thoughts together.
Right.
And sometimes we kind of talk each other in one direction, or if it's kind of shaky and in the middle, that'll make or break it, the conversation afterwards. This one I knew was great.
Yeah.
And I felt sad for you that you didn't understand.
I was surprised that you liked it as much as you did, but I'm so glad that you loved it.
I exaggerate because I get really excited by art that speaks to me, but I think this is the most punishing, well-crafted horror movie I've seen of this year.
Wow,
anyway.
That's amazing.
So I wanted to dig into the alchemy of what I loved so much about this movie. Basically, beyond giving it my full-throated recommendation, I wanted to find the ingredients. I wanted to pick through the cauldron and see the elements that are blending together so well. Because I realized afterwards that this film evokes and evolves some of my all-time favorite works of horror. I think they're all thrown in there and mixed up together. They're stewed up. Some of them feel updated or refreshed, and they form something totally new and magical together. So I want to play with those disparate elements. And I should always caveat this. None of this has to be intentional. I never speak to author's intent. It's unknowable. And for the purposes of conversation, it's almost irrelevant. So these are just things that spoke to me that reminded me of some of my favorite works of horror.
Here, let me waste time and guess what they are. No,
The
you
thing
just
is,
tell me.
You love these three things, so
Okay.
I'm very excited to see some of these like Tetris blocks fall into place for you.
Cool, okay.
So the first one started right at the beginning of the movie when we walk into the antique shop, which is the shop full of the titular oddities. And it pulled me right back to when I was very young, seeing the first Conjuring movie in theaters.
Oh, sure, yeah.
The promise of that room full of cursed objects. It wasn't just, oh, hey, this could be a franchise going through all these different cabinets.
Right.
But it really captured your imagination. You know, you're glancing at, oh, God, what's that little monkey with the symbols? All these elements.
And it adds like a timeless quality to it. Like it adds this historicism, and I think that helps heighten the supernatural feeling because it's like as something out of time. It's not just grounded in the modern day. So that is very fun.
It broadens your expectations. It puts the movie right on the shelf next to all your other horror movies. It evokes the pantheon in a really comforting way. But it brought me back to The Conjuring and that excitement of possibility of this story's going to play with the occult and it kind of could go anywhere. So that was the setup for me, was thinking about that magical first experience with The Conjuring, which that was a formative, scarring movie for me.
Sure.
The next thing was, I talked about how beautiful the locations are for this film. The color grading. It's such a warm, rich, wood-stained, beautiful film.
Oh yeah, it looks amazing.
Even in the first scene, there are a lot of shots of a guy, he shows up at a door. And instead of having a little peephole, it's this little like latch that you pull back.
Yeah, like a little window.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that you'd put a food tray through in prison, like
Right,
just
but
your
it's much
picture.
smaller. Yeah. Uh-huh.
But that means that all these close-ups of the guy who's on the other side of the door, you're seeing this beautiful yellow-brown kind of framing him. And so much of your early impression of the film is those gorgeous warm colors. You have the yellow light that and there's so many flashlight scenes. You have the yellow light kind of creeping and bleeding through so much of the film.
Well, and like the yellow tent that she's staying
Yes.
in, so that like bright warm, and then even the pop of her red sweater, I think, really adds a richness to it. It's
And
fun.
It's that warmth of color. It's these old, rich. I mean, the effect that it creates altogether in the looks, the aesthetic, the environments. It's the clothing as well. I'm glad you mentioned that. It's this sumptuous, rich kind of upper crust, stylish but spare look, which is so aesthetically pleasing. But I realized after the second time we cut away and cut back to the big house, the estate that is sort of our main location for the film, I realized the second time when we cut back to that house that it was reminding me of The Haunting of Hill House.
Okay.
And if you follow that trail a little further, this film, without spoiling anything, just gesturing at stuff that's pretty much in the trailers, the film dabbles in some dual timeline stuff in the same way Hill House does. And it has some nested mysteries surrounding a family death.
Sure, and there's ghosts, and
Yes.
like at one point the ghosts, I think, transition from being scary to sad in the way that it is in Hill House.
And compassionate. There's an extra
Yeah.
sensitive / perceptive character who wears gloves.
Yep.
There's some Hill House. So you start with The Conjuring, then you move to Hill House.
Yeah, I definitely caught the Hill House echoes there. That was really fun for me.
And we adore that. That
Yeah.
series means a lot to both of us.
Yeah,
but
a lot.
Combining those two elements, The Conjuring and Hill House, it's a nice combination. Very much up my alley. It means I am seated.
Yeah,
and I'm
already
locked in.
you're ready to go. Yeah.
But those two things together, or even on their own, I mean, Conjuring scared me, but I was young. But those two things together would not make for the scariest palm sweating experience that I had.
Right. No, just more like exciting and meaningful and interesting.
And here's where we get to the last element. And this is why I wanted to talk about the alchemy, because it's the combination of these three elements that come together to form something really special. I really think Oddity is a special horror movie. And that third element, that last favorite horror movie that it was evoked here, was Hell House LLC.
Yeah.
So this is
I was thinking of that too.
That's a found footage film. And obviously this isn't, but it kind of is.
In many
because-
ways, yes, with the camera.
Yes, there are so many moments
yeah.
of characters watching old videos or pictures on the little viewfinder of a camera. Sometimes we zoom in and get those full screen as little vignettes. So there is a bit of that, but mostly what I mean is the creature design.
Mm-hmm.
So the main, and this is all over the trailers, it's in our thumbnail, it's the thing they're leading with in all of their promotional materials, is this wooden man. I won't go deeper than that, but this wooden guy, this weird-ass, silent, screaming, carved figure that sits at a table through most of the movie. It evokes that clown from Hell House. Hell House.
One of the scariest things I've ever seen. We never talked about it on the show.
We will
one day.
We will.
It's one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. It freaked me out. Every time I think about it too hard, I get a little too creeped out.
And like this movie, the scary part of Hell House and the clown, it's the writing. It's not a budget. It's not CG. It's just a clown. Like, it's an unmoving, it seems undead, but it's a gestural work of horror. When you cut back the characters with this shaky cam, when they cut back to the clown, sometimes its head has tilted.
Right.
But it's all these movements in between shots.
It's all about what you don't see. It's all about what you're imagining, and that's what makes it so scary. Is your imagination. Yeah.
It's horror that starts on the page instead of being this explosive, scary effect.
Like, it won't get scary until you like actually put it on the screen.
And that happens here with the wooden man, where it's treated almost as this unmoving granite monument that the characters have to exist around. And it's so scary and unnerving. Without spoiling anything, I would say that they even go further than Hell House, because the characters explore the wooden man in a way that Hell House doesn't explore the clown.
Yes, for sure.
But just like Hell House, this guy, this wooden man, absolutely horrified me. Like, just a cold dread every time.
Yep.
And he was always on screen.
And he was always like kind of in the corner. Yeah,
yes.
Always there, and like often unaddressed, often like not part of the scene, but just there. Much in the way that other things are just there that I don't want to spoil. But
I was just locked in, intense through this entire runtime. It's twisty, it's smart, and this feels like a stupid thing to say, but I think everyone listening knows what I mean. Every actor in this movie has a great face.
Yeah.
Like capital F face. Just really intriguing, expressive, unusual, engaging faces.
Yeah. And I did like the mix of personalities and like levels of willingness to engage with the supernatural that each of the characters have. You kind of have 4 main characters, and like the girlfriend was one of my favorite characters, because she was so like not about what was happening, but not like in a dumb annoying way, just in a like realistic person way, compared to like the twin, who is so in her own world about other things. I liked that contrast. It was fun.
The movie's around an hour and a half. It just stoked my fear the whole time. It felt like kind of stoking a fire and keeping that tension alive. I never felt safe. Even in the downtime talking scenes, I never felt confident that they would stay that way. There was such a craft and tension throughout every scene of this. It's a smaller movie, Shudder original, Irish work of horror. I just wanted to spotlight it here and give it our recommendation. If we can get some eyeballs on it. It was so good. It just scared the shit out of me.
It was pretty frightening. Speaking of eyeballs, there is a lot of eyeball imagery in this scene, in this movie. Did you notice like all of the stuff on the walls and
I
stuff?
thought of you with seen and unseen.
Everything looks like eyeballs. Obviously, you have the stuff with the sister being blind and the glass eye from the dude. So there's a lot of stuff about eyes going on in here, which is really fun.
But if you want even more horror from us, say you're here from those Longlegs episodes, we've got a lot more horror discussions can check out.
We do.
Just here, if you're listening on Spotify to the podcast version, or if you're on YouTube, I'm going chronologically. We did another indie horror episode in March on a movie called Invader. That is absolutely terrifying. That one is so scrappy and scary. We talked about Rosemary's Baby in the context of Jane Austen and Friedrich Nietzsche.
That's right. Yeah.
We talked about a great horror comic called The Me You Love in the Dark. And of course, we've done multiple years of our Summer Ween series, where we go through all sorts of horror movies for like 8 or 10 weeks in a row. But that's not it. Over on Patreon, $2 a month, you can support the show and get even more horror. We did a roundup episode on female body horror recently, which in one episode talked about Immaculate, The First Omen, the Suspiria remake in 2018, Stop Motion, another incredible indie horror movie from this year, and Love Lies Bleeding. We also have episodes on Saw 10, the Salem's Lot book that Maggie leads, Talk to Me, The Boogeyman, Pearl, Barbarian, Black Christmas, and even more in our Roundup Breakfast Buffet episode. So we're about to finish up House of the Dragon, and our schedule will change. We're going to be a little less all fantasy, and we're going to get a lot more time for horror. So thank you very much for joining us for these horror discussions. Thank you so much for responding to those Longlegs episodes so strongly. The comments are so thoughtful. The observations, I've just been blown away by the reception there.
Y'all are so engaged and like interesting and have such good ideas.
Yes.
It's so exciting to engage in that way.
Yeah. So we're trying to build out this little community to just have fun discussions about art. Please go check out Oddity. It is just killer.
Yes.
Fantastic work of horror.
And let us know what you thought about the movie. Let us know if you agree with any of the stuff we talked about on this episode. If you're on YouTube, you can comment below. Keep the conversation going. That's what keeps this fun.
Great. Thank you very much. And we'll be back in just a few days for a brand new episode.